YouTube! Today I'm going to be sharing my most prized possession in chess with all of you. The London system. Legend has it that before the mitochondria there was the London, the powerhouse of the cell. It is the most versatile, the most superior opening for white. You can play it against anything. So I'm going to be doing a crash course where I cover the main lines and some novelty moves. But this crash course is mainly for intermediate chess players. However, beginners can learn something too. So let's get started. We begin with d4. As you guys know, bishop f4 is the second move. We're going to start with one of the most common responses, which is going to be going for the d5, c5 setup and trying to trade the dark squared bishop. So one thing you should pay attention to is whether your opponent is going to be blocking in their light squared bishop or not. In this case, this is what makes the London so strong, in my opinion. This bishop is terrible. It's like a bishop from the French. He's trapped, he has nowhere to go, while our light squared bishop is living life. So this is one of my favorite things about the London. So let's go. We're always going to play knight f3. Remember that we're playing the knight before the pawn and the bishop. So knight d2 should come before the c3 push and before we develop this bishop. So this move order is very important. So now one of the most common responses, bishop d6 in one move. There we go. Okay. So what I recommend, the most simple to play, is bishop g3, we retreat. If they choose to trade the bishops, it's actually a relief for us because now white has a very simple plan of attack. We have the open file, we have this diagonal that we can use to put our queen or our bishop on. We have this e5 square, we have this g-pawn, which we can later use to attack. So queen d6. So this move defends the c5 pawn, which we were threatening to take. Also provides maybe a chance to queenside castle. So here we play bishop b5. The main goal for a lot of these positions in the London, especially when we play bishop g3, is to use the e5 square. And even though this is one of our strongest pieces, by trading it off for the knight, we actually leave black with something called a bad bishop. They're going to have a light squared bishop while all their pawns will also be on light squares. So our two knights are going to be very strong in comparison to this knight and this bishop. So let's say they defend, we happily trade. Now we have removed the defender of the e5 square, so we can bring out our knight. This also opens the queen, which will help our plan to push the g-pawn and make castling very tricky. If he castles right now, we could just push g4, and now we have a threat of g5, and then maybe queen here. Black has to play very passive, something like this. Queen c2, attacking here, g6, knight df3, and white has a very comfortable position here. They have lots of weak squares around the king, which are these dark squares. We can either castle queenside, we can delay it. Our knight is defending here, so this is a very nice position for white. So let's say that they don't castle and they play the correct move, which is queen c7. Queen c7 trying to defend here as well, so that maybe they could queenside castle. So we respond with queen f3. Well, this is kind of counterintuitive because in openings you're taught not to bring out your queen and not to delay your castle, and this is actually exactly what we're doing. But this is because white has so much of an attack and black really can't castle anyway, while we could castle either queenside or kingside. Both are safe for us. If they castle here, then this is the immediate weakness, and if they castle here, then this is why we're waiting, because we can eventually use the a pawn and try to break through on these kingside pawns. So queen f3, the point is to put pressure on the file so that they can't trade off our knight. If they play knight d7, we just take right away. So queen f3, let's say they push h6 to maybe prevent this later. We push, we're gonna play, actually this is a game for Magnus, so he plays kind of prophylactic, which is good, but you know, we're not all gonna play GM level. Queen f4 to control the dark squares, and I won't continue much longer because I want to keep this very focused on the first few opening moves. But plan here for white is to try to threaten this pawn push, use the pin, and in the game Magnus castled kingside, and if you want to look into it more, I highly recommend analyzing this on your own. But this is a great position for white. As you can see, they completely have the attack. So that is if they take on g3. If they don't, what do we play? A very similar idea. Funny that you ask. So they castle. We play bishop b5 again, attacking the main defender of the center, trying to break down on this pawn structure and create some weaknesses. They could actually fall into a very easy trap here. They push a6. I'll do a quick little recap on this. So bishop takes. Now we use our queen to start attacking these weak light squared pawns. Let's say they defend with the queen. Now we can trade forcing the queen to move again, and a very nice move, queen a3, pinning the pawn, so if they take, they lose their queen, attacking this pawn twice, they defend, we attack, and white actually wins a pawn in this position. So that's why black wouldn't want to push a6. Let's say that they instead retreat the knight. This is the main line and the most played move. So because they're retreating their minor piece, we can also retreat ours. Bishop d3. And from here, the main plan for the London will be to push in the center. So often when you get these type of positions, we always want to break through somewhere. Maybe we want to push the e pawn, sometimes even the c pawn. Sometimes if they push b6, we push the a pawn. So we're trying to gain a little bit of space while also aiming this e5 square with our knight. So bishop d3 eyes the e4, b6 so that they can take the sad little bishop somewhere. He's going to try to fianchetto. From here, we push e4, we trade in the center, and now white is really having the control here, forcing his opponent to move his rook to the dark square diagonal. And this is where I'm going to stop my analysis. This is a very famous game though by Magnus Carlsen, where I'll show you guys just a few moves, but mainly I want us to understand this position, that this is the purpose of retreating the bishop, to gain the space here in the center, and then you kind of trade off and go into a middle game that favors white. So we force all of these trades, queen trades, bishop trades, everything. They attack our bishop because they have to, because otherwise our bishop is just completely dominating and attacking on h7. And then Magnus played a very nice move, c6, threatening the fork, knight here to prevent the pawn push, we trade, and now rook d1, trying to trade the rooks, and pretty much we play against the bad light squared bishop. We have both these squares for our knight, and if they don't take, we're going to give them a very ugly pawn structure here. This is going to be isolated. We can attack this with our knight, and this is a very nice position to have as white. So just to recap, this came from the bishop b5 line, and the main idea in this line is to retreat to d3 so that we can push in the center and go into a middle game that favors us. That is the most important responses against the bishop to d6. Okay, so now that we covered what happens when they trap in the light squared bishop and they try to go for the dark squared bishop trade, I'm going to show you guys the two main ways that black tries to develop this bishop instead. The first one is the copycat style, where they go for bishop f5. This is going to be one of the few positions where we go for c4 instead of c3. Keep in mind that what black sacrifices to take out this bishop early is that he doesn't get e6. And the importance of the e6 pawn push was that it opens up the bishop defense on c5, which is why black often pushes c5 early, forces our c3. So now we develop normally knight f3, c6. If they try to push c5 instead, we can actually just take here right away because the bishop is not defending. So they push c6, and now it's our turn to push c4. c4, e6, they defend. And this c4, whenever you get it in, it's a very powerful move because it opens up the queen here. So the bishop used to be a defender on c8, defending the very important b7 square, which is now a major weakness for black. So queen b3, this is a great line, one of my favorite lines to play into. The best defense for black is queen b6, where we get the tempo c5, forcing the queen to take, otherwise they lose this pawn. Take, take. Black develops with knight d7. And now another important London note is the move h3. We always play this kind of early, often before developing the light squared bishop, because if black is threatening this move here, they'll trade off our most important piece. For example, if we played bishop e2 and they got this, we can't come here because they'll take, can't come here because of the knight. Obviously, we can't use these squares. So often h3 is used to create a safe square for our bishop. So h3, if they do it now, we can run to h2. Very important move, often can be forgotten and it can be punished very easily. So black goes a6 to try to prevent our b5 push, where we would take advantage of the pin. We push anyway because we want to use the space for our knight. Develop, knight comes out, castle, knight here, and now this is a fantastic position for a white. We have the space, knight's going to come to a5, attacking this weak pawn. Black cannot defend from b8, so he has to really misplace his rook. We can often have this threat of trying to break through and using the pinned rook if he ever gets undefended. We're going to develop our bishop to e2. We can castle, bring the other rook in. We can bring this knight to either e5. We can either reroute it this way if we want. There's a lot of ideas, and this is a critical position I recommend you analyzing if you really like understanding middle game positions. So that is what we play against the Copycat line. Now we'll be transitioning to some of the other more aggressive lines for blacks, where they start with c5. So this main idea I'm showing you guys quickly just to show you the other option for how black could develop the light squared bishop. So d5 we develop, and knight c6, we always take out this knight before the bishop, very important move order, and bishop g4. So here, it's very important that we don't push h3 to kick it, even though it's tempting, but we push c3. This is because we're going to be using the same idea that we did against the Copycat, trying to use the b3 square for our queen. So e6, and now queen b3. The best defense for black is queen c8, and now we can push h3, and if they trade, it's just going to help us bring our knight into the center. They're helping us develop, and we continue here normally. We can play the bishop to e2, then we can castle, then we can come here, we can bring, knight here, we can bring our rook to the file, and very typical London development. The importance of waiting to push this h3, because if we do it earlier, and let's say they trade right now, then black gets the opportunity to play bishop b6, and so our queen b3 move won't be so powerful anymore. This is why it's really nice to force this queen b3 move right away, which moves the defender of the d6 square and makes our bishop here a monster, which is going to be the main advantage for this line. Okay, so there are two other important lines I want to cover with the c5 idea. If your opponent pushes c5 very early, this can sometimes be intimidating to play as white, because they're going to come with the early queen b6 attack here and putting pressure on the center pawn. We can't really defend with our queen. But there's a novelty move that I must share with you guys. So e3, typical move order, queen b6. So in this position, all you have to remember is knight a3. The purpose of this move is so that we can come to c4, which would attack the queen, defend, and if they don't play correctly, they may also allow knight b5, which will threaten this fork. So knight a3 is actually better than knight c3 because we have the option of jumping to c4. So I'll only show you guys just a few moves, but if you know knight a3, you will be good here. So if they push e6, like I said, we'll jump to c4. And what if they try to take our pawn? In this position, knight b5 threatens the fork here to win the rook. The only defense is knight a6. And now after a3, this is very difficult to play for black. So the pawn a3 here is defended by the knight, which is nearly trapping the queen. White is starting ideas with bishop c4 to control the square. Rook b1 is coming. This pawn will be under attack, can't take because the knight is an important defender, and this is a winning position for white. I recommend analyzing a little bit more, but this is all you guys need to know. Okay, so continuing with the c5 idea, let's say that they continue with the normal developing moves, d5, knight f6, and we're going to look at one last queen b6 idea. This line is what grandmasters thought was the best refutation to the London, and boy, they were wrong. Thank you to my little friend, Eric Rosen, which actually a huge shout out to Eric Rosen. He is the London master. He's taught me a lot of my craft, and this is a famous game from AlphaZero and Stockfish. There is a very critical move order here, and the best way to prevent the queen b6 attack. So here, knight c6 and knight d2. Always remember, knight d2 before we push the pawn. I will show you why. Here comes queen b6, which can be very annoying to play against. And if we push c3, the problem would be that we would have to defend with our queen. We can't come here because they have the very annoying bishop move here. And if we get stuck here, then now white is just kind of controlling our diagonal. We can't develop here. And this is very passive. You don't want to be in this position as white. So that's why we play knight d2 first. After queen b6, we take our forcing move, pawn takes c5. So I'm just going to show you the main line, which is queen takes b2. Queen takes b2, we continue with forcing moves. Rook b1, attacking the queen, forcing it to its only square on c3. We develop the bishop, and the main idea is we're going to be trying to control the center, use the pin of the king, and we are really just ahead in development because black spent so much time fiddling around with their queen. We're just going to play normal. It doesn't matter if we lost the pawn. We castle, they take out their bishop, and now a beautiful move, which goes into an in-depth analysis, but I don't want to spend too much time on this. I'm just trying to focus on the basics. e4. So we use our advantage that the queen is misplaced. There's a lot of threats, so if they capture, we can even sack our knight and play knight c4, threatening the bishop here. Of course, after we take, trying to trap this, we're also threatening rook b3, which would trap the queen. We're also threatening this, which the knight controls here. So there are just endless ways to trap the queen. So this, of course, you really have to study this line. but black ends up in some very tricky business. So just to do a short recap, if they play queen b6, we're all forcing moves. We take the pawn, attacking the queen. We move the rook, attacking the queen. We develop the bishop, trying to pin the knight so that we can use these squares with both our bishop and our knight. They develop normally. We castle because we have to unpin our knight. And then comes e4, a beautiful move, trying to free up this square for our knights so that we can force trap the queen. Also, the square is very important because after knight c4, we will control a3. Okay, so there's one last line that I'd like to cover, and it's if black plays the Indian system, which is going for the g6, pionchetto, d6 pawn, knight here. Here we will not be playing normal London stuff, but something much stronger. So d4, knight f6, bishop f4, and now if your opponent commits to the King's Indian with g6, we play knight c3. Knight c3 actually has some very interesting Jobava London lines, which if you want to look on your own time, and you have become an experienced London player, I highly recommend it. So knight c3, we play this because it's one of the few positions in the London where we can push e4 really early. So here bishop g7, we push e4, and now queen d2. Very typical move. We want to control the h6 and we want to open the queenside castle. They castle, we finish our development, and this is the main line for black. c6, because mainly our attack is going to be so strong with the h-pawn and the bishop on h6, where if they allow us to open, we're going to have very forcing checkmate threats on h7. So they need to find a way to attack our king, which is trying to use these pawns here and to try to attack our knight. So here we played bishop h6. We want our most forcing move. They don't want to take, so they would go b5. Next, they're threatening pawn push b4 to attack the defender of the e4 pawn, which is what this knight is attacking. So this is why we reply with f3. We have no worry about this threat. And before white gets to start playing very aggressive, we want to make sure that our king side is safe. So here, king b1, we often play, it's kind of just a compulsory move to defend the a2 square. Say they play super aggressive, we're not scared. Knight e2, they try to keep pushing, and finally it's our turn to attack. h4, they do here, and I'll show you a very simple way that white can just block everything. Trade, push a3, and now this is a great position because they cannot touch our king. This pawn has blocked everything. The knight will come back to c3, which will make room for this knight maybe coming here. And white has a clear plan of pushing here, even g4 if they want to, trying to trade on the king side. And I highly recommend playing this against the King's Indian. Okay guys, well that is the London Crash Course, where we covered some novelties like the knight a3 idea against queen b6, some of the main ideas, the most common reputations like bishop d6. I hope that the London serves you well as it has served me, and I know that this video was a little bit more advanced compared to my very first chess video, so if you guys have any questions, just put them in the comment section and I'll try my best to answer them. Hope this helped you guys, and have a great day.
You look at me and think